Today we're going to be working on between a 99 and a 2003 Acura TL. This one's actually a year 2000, and the vehicle is idling from 1.5 RPM to 3. When you start it up, it idles at 1.5, but then after a few minutes it starts to jump up and down. So what we're going to do is we're going to take the throttle body out, clean it up, and replace it with some gasket, and then see where it goes from there. But we're going to start the vehicle so you can get an idea of how it's idling. And this is the symptom that we're having here. RPM is jumping from low RPM to high RPM. And the RPM is jumping from 1 to 2. So we're going to go ahead and take this throttle body apart, bring it up, and see if it fixes the issue. For this project, these are the tools you'll need. Is an 8mm, a 12 wrench, needle nose or plier, power tool, and a magnet bow to keep all the bolts and nuts. And you'll need a 10mm wrench. What we're going to do first is disconnect the battery, because we're going to be unplugging all the power source from the throttle body. So we'll disconnect the negative terminal. Put that to the side. Next, these got the cable here for the throttle, and then the other one for the cruise control. We'll go ahead and loosen that up, and then get these cables out of the way. So basically, you'll turn all these bolts or nut all the way down, and then pull it, loosen it, pull this cable here, and there's a little thing that goes into a gap. You'll pull that to the side. Same thing for the cruise control cable. Pull that out, and then that will come out. Pull that to the side, and then there will be some clips that we're going to disconnect. This one we're going to disconnect here, and then there's some clips here that we're going to disconnect as well. What you're going to use there is some pliers. So you're going to disconnect this clip, pull to the side, pull that out, pull that cable out right here. You're going to disconnect that cable, unclip that. Okay, you're going to clip this, pull that out, and then right here is, we're also going to need a Phillips screwdriver. And we'll loosen that up. As we're loosening that up, now over here in the air filter box, we're going to loosen these 8mm. and then you're gonna release this hose right here from the side, and then this filter box will release, and we're gonna put that to the side. Okay, so now from the throttle body we got two more hoses down here that's connected to the throttle body. So we're going to disconnect that hose and this hose with some pliers. Pull that one out. Pull that clip down. Go ahead and pull that down. Okay. Now there's a power source here, the plug. We're going to unclip that and pull it out. And now everything's disconnected from the throttle body. Now what we're gonna do is disconnect the throttle body from the intake manifold. So there's gonna be two nuts on the top and two bolts on the bottom. Okay, and that will release the throttle body. Now the throttle body is gonna have a gasket between the intake manifold and the throttle body. So these are 12 millimeter here, and let me go get that. First thing we're going to do, we're going to break them loose. And we're going to follow it with the power tool. So we're going to go ahead and release the bottom one first. One, two. So we got the two long bolts from the bottom. We got one nut and two nut. So from there, we're going to go ahead and release the throttle body, and it should just come out. So somebody's taken this off before and resealed it with gasket. So there's gonna be some you have to use some force to pop this off. All right, so now we're taking that 4 bolts off, and we kind of tapped it with the rubber mallet, and now we popped it off. So last service, somebody put a lot of silicone on there, and it stuck on there pretty well. And there you are with that part. So we're going to take this apart, clean it up, and go from there. And this is what the part looked like. That's the back side of the throttle body. There's another, this is a plate. There's it screwed on right there. So we're going to unscrew that. This back plate will come off. And then there's a gasket in between that. And then we'll get into more details when we take things apart and clean it up. Alright, so here is the specs to take apart the intake manifold. The throttle body, sorry. And so the top is going to be the map sensor, and it has an O-ring. Okay, on the side we got the throttle position TP sensor, and below it we got the idle air control, the IAC valve. It has an O-ring replacement. We're not going to mess with the idle adjusting screw. We're going to leave that alone. And here is from the throttle body to the intake manifold, and those are kind of what we showed you how to disconnect earlier. So what we're going to do first is take out the map sensor. So there's 2 screws on top. It's going to be a Phillips screwdriver, and what we're going to do is take these apart, and we're going to clean up the throttle body really well, because there's a lot of buildup inside of it, and so that could be the cause of the idling bouncing up and down. So that's the map sensor there. Okay, and then right here, as you can see, there's an O-ring, and since we're doing replacement or cleaning everything up, we'll replace the O-ring. Right here on the side is the throttle position sensor, TP sensor, and it looks like you can't take this out, so we're not going to mess with that. We'll leave that alone. But while we're cleaning it, we're not going to spray anything in there to interrupt that sensor. Okay, at the bottom is the idle air control. Now this may be the cause of our idling going up and down, so we're going to go ahead and remove this. Now when you have an issue where the screws are tight, we're going to impact that screw out. And you're asking, what do you mean by impacting? So there's a tool where you hammer, and it's gonna break that screw loose, and then we can unscrew it. And while you're hammering the screwdriver, it's gonna turn it, and it's gonna be tedious because I need something to hold it in place. So we'll start with this one first. So I'm going to get a hammer, and not a very hard hammer, a light hammer. And my luck is I do not have it here. Let's see here. So what we're going to do is we're going to tap it. And it should loose. And of course this is not going to work because, there you go. It tapped it loose. And then we're going to try the other side here. Set that in, and then tap it. And that should have broke it loose, and it did. So that tool was really useful to break loose and not break the parts. So it just breaks the screw loose, because if you don't do that and you try to use a screwdriver, you either ruin your screwdriver or you're gonna strip the actual screw, and then you're gonna have a hard time taking it off. So right here is the idle control, and you can see how dirty it is there, and we're gonna clean that up. Alright, we're going to put that to the side there. And right here you can see the O-ring that goes in there. And we'll clean that up and replace that O-ring. If anything, if the O-ring still looks good, and this one does, we'll probably just put some silicone there to seal between those two, because they'll save some bucks. Now, let's see, what are we gonna do here? We're gonna go ahead and take this bolt here off, and take this off, and then replace that gasket in between. So it's just one Phillips screwdriver. One Phillips screw. Unscrew it. Put it to the side. That's the screw there. And then you take this cover off, and there's the gasket. It's pretty dry. And then what we'll do is we'll get a scraper and scrape around there, clean it all up. Clean all this up here, all around the area. And then take that gasket out, take that O-ring out, replace with a new O-ring. We'll clean the inside of that throttle body, and then we'll go from there. So we're going to take this O-ring out, and you can see how flat that is, and we're going to replace it with this O-ring, and it's more rounded and thicker. So when we put that in and we add the sensor back on it, it's going to seal it a lot more. That way air can be trapped in there and do what it needs to do. So I'm going to take this gasket out, okay, and it's still in good condition. It's not as thick as it should. So when I put this back in, when everything's cleaned up, I'm going to put a little silicone on there, and then the silicone gasket maker. That way it will seal it. That way I don't have to purchase a new one. We're going to spray around the area here. And then we'll go ahead and brush it. So cleaning this up, it's not going to be perfect, but at least you broke up a lot of the debris and whatever that's built up right here. So right now it might look like there's some buildup right here, but I cleaned up enough where it's actually flat. So now we're going to go to this side here, and we're going to spray around this area and go ahead and try to carve these old paper gasket that was applied. So I'm going to go ahead and spray that. Let's scrape all that old stuff there. So when we put everything back together, we're not going to put a paper gasket. We're just going to put a fine thin layer of silicone gasket maker. that would be enough to seal it, just to save some bugs. If you want to, you can go to your nearest auto parts and purchase a paper gasket. But I really think if you have silicone maker, just put a thin layer and you'll be fine. I don't think it will hurt anything. But it's really up to your own preference of what you think. But if you put a thin layer, you'll be fine. And just try to do your best to clean and make it a flat surface. It's going to be difficult to get everything and clean it really well. Basically, the key is to get everything flat, because when you put a new gasket or you put the silicone in it, you know, you want it to be set evenly onto the throttle body. Okay, so from here, what we're going to do is now clean the inside of the throttle body. That would be that plate there. So I'm going to fill it up with brake cleaner and let it sit for a minute, and then we're going to clean that buildup there. So I don't know how long that buildup's been sitting in that throttle body, but you know, whatever we can clean up will help. Even if you might have to scrape it. Now on this type of throttle body, what I'm doing is okay, but some throttle bodies, like the electronic ones for new vehicles, you can't really do what I'm doing because it's actually more sensitive. So you got to be very, very careful. On the electronic throttle bodies, when you disconnect it, you'll have to do a relearn. This is more mechanical, so if the way to do the relearn is more mechanical wise, more of a setting than in cleaning, maintaining than electronically. And sometimes when you have to electronically do a relearn, sometimes you have to take it to the dealer, and they're the only ones that can do the relearn, and that kind of sucks because they charge quite a bit. Okay, so that's the best I can do on that. And then what's going to sit on that is this side. So we're just going to spray that, and then we're going to scrape all these old gasket off, but we'll do that after. We'll clean this up real first. Let's see, right here, we'll clean the inside of this intake manifold. We'll spray inside there. And when you do this type of job, make sure you're in an open space. You're not in the closed space, because the chemical of the cleaning stuff, like brake cleaner or other stuff, they're pretty strong. And if you breathe in, kind of like breathing gasoline in an indoor area, you could get a pretty serious headache. Okay, so we're going to go ahead and spray within these ports here and let it clean itself out. If you have like a certain cut, like round brush or something, you could like run it through and everything to help it clean, but I don't have that, so this will be fine. You can just let the chemical flow through there and clean it out. So this part's pretty clean now. I think that's the best we can do. And so from there, let's go ahead and start cleaning this part. And so this part, this side right here, sets against this. That's why it's flat, and the paper was in between. And then this side goes connects to the actual throttle, the intake manifold. So we're going to scrape all these old silicone gasket here. I don't know how long this gasket's been on this part, but it did its job when it was connected, because it gave me a little bit of a fight to take off. So we're going to scrape whatever we can. Alright, so we're going to place the silicone on this surface here. We're not going to put it on here because there's a lot of this is blocking the passageway here, and we don't want any silicone in that passageway. So I'm going to go ahead and put a thin layer around the area. And when I say thin, I really mean thin. Alright, that is your thin layer, not thick. And now, as you can see, there's a little guide pin there, and that goes into this spot right here. Okay, and so we're going to put that pin right there and guide that in, and then we're going to get the screw, Phillips screwdriver, and go ahead and screw that in. And it wasn't too tight when we released the screw, so we're just going to hand tighten that in like this. And there you are with that part. Okay, we'll set it on top like that. Okay, next what we're going to do is wipe whatever that's squished out of it. We're going to replace the O-ring from the old, and then we'll put the map sensor back on. We'll go ahead and check here. Everything looks pretty clean. Just kind of wipe it down and place it back on. And then make sure the sensor part is or the plug part is facing outwards. And then screw it in. And it's just hand tight. You don't need to over tighten it or over torque it. Okay. Alright, next we're going to put the old gasket back on. This one right here. And with this part right here, we're going to add just a light layer of gasket silicone around the area. Not thick, a light. All right. And then we're going to place the idle air control back on. And remember this, the sensor should go facing this side. It can go either way, but by the instruction, this is on the same side as the throttle position sensor. Okay, so you can screw that in. And if you remember, we had to knock these screw loose, but we're going to go ahead and just hand tight it. Because really you don't want to use any force torque on this, because we will definitely strip these bolts, screws, Phillips screwdriver heads. And then if we do that, we won't be able to unloosen these up or whatever. So there you have it. Everything's back together, and we're going to go ahead and put this back onto the car. The intake manifold, they use a gasket to seal the throttle body on, so we're going to go ahead and scrape that old stuff on and add the new silicone onto it. So go ahead and scrape that sucker off, get as much as you can off of that, so that way it'll be flat and even, so when we add the new one, it'll sit right on it and even. I mean, there is a gasket that goes between this as well, but again, if you want to spend the money and go buy a gasket, that's really up to you. But really, I think you can always use just silicone and seal it. It'll do just the same. Once you bolt it down, it'll make it even and everything. Well, everything looks pretty even to me. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to put some silicone onto it. And this right here, we will need to put a little bit thicker of a layer. So spread that on there all the way around. There you are. Now we're going to add the throttle body back on. It's back in. so. Then we're going to get the two nuts screwed onto the top. Get the 2 bolts, put that at the bottom. Okay, then we're going to get the tools here and slowly turn it in where it's even. Go ahead and get the hand tool and hand tight it. Again, with this, torquing it down, hand tight is fine, about 12 to 15 foot-pound. Again, this is made out of aluminum, so you don't want to tighten too much or you'll mess up the thread, and or you'll crack it, and you don't want to do that because then you have to go buy another. So that's pretty much it. And from there, we'll go ahead and connect everything back up. We got this connection here, goes in there, this right here. All right, we got a few lines here. This one at here goes to the bottom. Press that up. Get the pliers, pinch it, clamp it, pipe, pinch it tight, okay, and then see, that's pretty much it from the bottom. Now we will go ahead and put the what do you call it? The air filter cover back on with the air intake hose. Connect the hose in. Put the air filter down. This wiring goes around through this little clip here and into here. This line goes right here. And then we have this hose that will go clamp onto there, here, and then onto there, and we will clip this on to there. This will slide into here, like so. Now we have this that we will tighten up with a Phillips screwdriver. Hand tight is fine. You don't need to tighten up too tight. Enough where it's snug. Okay. Now we're going to connect these cables. We're going to put the accelerating cable into this slot and over. Put this there. Screw the bolt nut in place. Now we will get the cruise control cable. Set that in. Pop that through. Screw in the nut. That's a 12mm wrench. You're gonna tighten it up. And the same thing with the other side for the cruise control. Everything looks like it's connected. We're not missing anything. Always double check your work. Alright. Now we're going to screw in the air filter box. Go ahead and start out with the Phillips screwdriver. Get it started there. Sometimes they can be pain, or it won't go into place, and that's why you want to start with a Phillips screwdriver and not with a 8mm socket. But once you get it in place, then you come back around with the power tool and get that sucker in there. Power tools make your life easy, or sometimes difficult. And then last and not least, we're going to put the negative terminal back to the battery to put power into the motor. And we're going to start it up. So with everything in place, we're going to start up the motor and let it run. And as you can see now, the idle is at 1. So it looks like it kind of fixed it a little bit, but we will keep you updated.